Hi, this is Simpe from the Center for Risk Analysis. The narrative that Cyril Ramaphosa has gained strength within the ANC National Executive Committee still holds within mainstream media. However, what is the likelihood that we could see the prosecutions of high-profile leaders that are implicated in corruption?
Now, our conclusions are the following. The scale of corruption has become institutionalized. A comment from a colleague I drew into these conclusions, nearly woven into the fabric of both the ANC and the government. Now that's going to make, that is the price of the last decade of Mr. Zuma. It does make Mr. Ramaphosa's efforts far more difficult than a lot of media analysis suggests. This is not just a case of removing a few rotten eggs. This is a whole different kettle of fish. We also see in our analysis that the corruption is cross-factional. The idea that there's a clean ANC fighting a dirty ANC and that these are neat and tidy factions, one aligned to reformers and one aligned to something else, it doesn't actually hold up to scrutiny. And that many of those implicated in acts of corruption find themselves on what is publicly regarded as the better side of the party. And this will complicate ANC efforts to address the problem, because if the sincere efforts at prosecution are pursued, if cases go to court, many of those implicated will not go quietly, and many of those implicated will sit on the very side of the party that is making some attempt, nominally at least, to address the question of corruption. It also appears to us that if prosecutors are given a green light, political space to prosecute without fear and favor, the consequences could be to devastate the management ranks of the African National Congress. But such a move would first have to be agreed to within those ranks. And that's the great catch-22 here, that the people who may very well fall victim to the prosecutions end up in prison. They lose their jobs and titles. Very often people who will have some say and influence about whether those prosecutions proceed at all. And even if you can get past that problem and do the prosecutions, what is the consequences for the party itself, given the extent to which the rot has been internalized through the era of Mr. Zuma? We also flag the risk that if sincere action at scale, and I think that's the critical thing here, not to fall for the idea that a few test cases are prosecuted expendable mid-level operators who of little political consequence for the party. If sincere action is taken to clean up the leakage of funding out of the fiscus, that would undermine the patronage networks upon which ANC unity depends. Now, any political movement has to be held together by something. It can be held together by a great historical quest, such as the defeat of apartheid. It can be held together by an ideology, by an objective. It can also be held together by access to cash. And to some extent, I think it is true within some of the ranks of the ANC that there is a sense that if you're loyal to the party, you don't cause trouble, you don't jockey for position. You're a loyal cadre, you will be rewarded with access to cash through the state in one form or another. It might be a low level, a job in a municipality, it might be at a pretty high level, a tender or contract, something of that nature. Cut that off and you remove a lot of the glue that holds this very fractured and fractious movement together. Consequences of that, I'm not sure if the ANC could survive. A further conclusion we stumbled upon is the point I made to you earlier around Kenneth Brown's comments, that there's fraud on the one hand and there's inflated prices on the other. Now, a lot of the leakage, I think, plays out through inflated prices. The media, however, let me read the bullet to you. The preferential procurement policy has legal legitimacy. It is legally legitimate to be a middleman, to win a tender, to supply a good or a service to the state at a markup. Now, sometimes the markups are obscene. The principle remains the same. This has legal legitimacy, but it does in practice come down to the same rent seeking that the media and the public increasingly regard as corruption. So the media comes across a story of a good being supplied at a high markup. They describe that as corruption. But challenging that rent seeking would in effect put empowerment policy in South Africa on trial, and politically the country's not ready for that yet. And I think that's a backstop that will further complicate efforts to clean up the institutional rot. My sense ultimately, and I think shared by the bulk of my colleagues, is that the government appreciates, Mr. Ramaphosa certainly, that they are pressed to act. They must be seen to act because the political damage that would otherwise ensue, the political damage already ensuing is so very great. But they're trapped, and this is the dilemma, the title of this briefing, that sincere attempts to deal with corruption might end up tearing the ANC apart. And before I go back to Becky, we'll deal with his questions. We slotted this quote in, struck us when it was made, I think in 2018. I would rather be seen as a weak president than to split the ANC. So that's not my mission. My mission is to keep the ANC united. And I think as long as that remains a priority, Mr. Ramaphosa's mind and within the broader alliance, it'll be very difficult to act effectively and firmly against corruption. Before Becky takes over, Becky, give me 1 minute. If you are not familiar with everything that we do, we would like to change that. We do a lot of notes and things. Monday mornings, very popular. There's a podcast Becky and I do 7 a.m. Under 10 minutes on every major global and South African risk. We do a number of briefings, both bespoke briefings for clients and then more generic webinars such as this one this afternoon. We provide a lot of advice to firms and individuals who are making decisions about South Africa. They can test their decisions against some of our reads and understanding. And if you are not already engaged with us either at an institutional level or as an individual subscriber, we would very much like to change that. Broader picture on South Africa from us, there's an easy way to get into that. It's a book my colleagues and I published at the peak of the pandemic, Rise and Fall. Kindle edition is on Amazon. Real books are in exclusive books.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. If you'd like to gain access to our reports or exclusive client briefings, you can now sign up for our 1-month free trial. For more information, follow the link in the description box below.